Welcome to I Am Goddess Collective podcast, a sacred space for empowerment through modern magic, spiritual activism, and reclaiming your power. I am your host, Nixie Marie, feng shui practitioner, earth activist, and mystic, here to support and inspire your journey in becoming the change you wish to see in this world. That change starts within. Join myself and fellow thought leaders, metaphysical experts, and luminaries each week as we explore practical and magical ways to living in your highest alignment. Your journey as an empowered goddess begins here. Let's dive in. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of I Am Goddess Collective podcast. I hope you're having an amazing, blissed out week. If not, happy Tuesday, or whenever you find yourself tuning into this episode. I am very excited to have been interviewing the lovely Fleassy Malay, who's on the show today with us. She is an amazing spoken word poet, speaker, and she is on a mission to really use courage as a social change tool. So she's very much big on using your voice, and she's actually got some really awesome courses and workshops coming up to support you connecting to your voice and reawakening that voice within. So such a perfect podcast for Leo season, as so many of you tuned in to last week's episode. We've got Leo season. We've got lots of things happening in the house. It's awesome. I'm very excited. So anyways, before we dive into Fleassy's awesome interview, where she actually, I don't know if some of you guys are familiar with her viral video that was blasted out called Witch. Some of you might have seen it. If you haven't, she actually shares it with us on the show today. So you will hear it. If you haven't heard it at all, you'll hear it today. And so it's really powerful. I actually found her through the Grahams, and she and I connected there, and I was like, listen, sister, we got to get you on the show. So she's here. She's ready to share with us how we use our voice, confidence, courage. She gets real. She's vulnerable. Super awesome goddess. Super happy to have her here. But first and foremost, before we do that, I actually have a couple announcements, and I want to read a review. Sisters, we got a review in the house. I'm very excited. You guys know how much I love reviews. They really help support the show and grow. They support the show and grow. I just rhymed. Hey, we're getting ready for the spoken word poet, and she's the ultimate. I don't think she really rhymes, but you know, we're setting the intention here. Okay, I'm just being a dork. All right, so thank you so much, G. Jen. She says, love. I adore Nixie Marie and the I Am Goddess Collective podcast. There is so much diversity of information that is rooted in a heart-centered and feminine way. I would highly recommend this podcast to anyone that wants to hear authentic sharing from some inspiring goddesses. Thanks, Nixie Marie, for all that you bring to the world. Love you. Oh, thanks, love. Thank you. I love you too, and very honored to be able to be the conduit of this amazing platform and community that we've built here. So thank you. And if you have not yet gone over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the podcast, we're actually now on Spotify as well as on YouTube. So if you feel like putting on YouTube, there's not a video that follows it, but wherever you listen to podcasts, I would really appreciate you guys leaving a review. And if you do, I have a little bonus for you. Are you guys ready? So this is my announcement. If you leave a review or screenshot your favorite episode and share it in your Instagram stories and tag I Am Goddess Collective podcast on Instagram, you will have a chance to enter a contest where you will be able to sit with our monthly membership coven in our full moon ritual. So our full moon ritual is actually every single month. So you'll be able to access that next month for August, September. Just trying to think about when this podcast is being released. Anyways, so you'll be able to sit in with us. It's such an amazing circle of women. It's a live Zoom chat. So share it out, share the love. you get to join us. So I will announce the winner every single month through Instagram, or you might, if you didn't do it through Instagram and you just wrote us a review, I will make sure to find you, or you can screenshot it and send that to Nixie at iamgoddesscollective.com. Email that over. And if you have not yet joined our Facebook group, please head on over there. There's lots of awesome conversations happening and support and sisterhood. So head on over to Facebook, type in I Am Goddess Collective, and find us there. And I'm sure you guys heard my announcement last week about Clarity, my new product line that I have released out into the world. And it has only been really exclusively released to you guys as my OG audience. So head on over to clarity.com, claryti.com/goddess. So clarity, claryti.com/goddess for your discount. It's up to 30% off the starter kit. So find out all the information on our website. I'm very excited to see what you guys think. It's definitely my new baby that I'm have given birth to. It's definitely a process, but I'm very excited. So thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for being here. Let's dive into this lovely episode with Fleassy Malay.
Hello, beautiful goddesses. Welcome back to another lovely episode on the I Am Goddess Collective podcast. I have a very special guest here on the show with us today. We've got Fleassy Malay, and I hope I said that correctly. Just realized I did not ask you how you pronounce your name. Hello, how are you?
I am good, and yes, you pronounced it perfectly.
Okay, beautiful. Well, Fleassy is a 2 times TEDx speaker and viral poet. Some of you might have recognized one of her beautifully and powerfully videos that was really to embody this word witch, right? And she is internationally renowned. I was going to say evocative, but that's what it does say. Evocative and powerful spoken word artist, speaker, and coach. And she's also a global advocate for women's rights and a fierce voice for the power of authenticity, courage, and as a voice as a social change tool. So it is no like shadow of why she's here to speak today. I'm really excited to hear what you are here to say and use your voice. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of talking about opening up the voice and living from our authentic truth and taking off our masks and really, getting in that vulnerable place. And if I know, like anybody knows, that going through that process isn't easy, and there's a lot of things that we are met with. So I'd love to sort of hear first and foremost, like how you got started on this journey and what called you to speak as a artist and a poet and use your voice for the greater good.
I think a big journey for me is just the journey of shame, that the dynamic with shame that we each have in our own way. And for me, I guess there was a few layers of it. Of being a girl, we have so much shame put on us for our voices, for speaking up, for our bodies, for how we show up in the world. And then as a queer person as well, there was the levels of shame in that. And as somebody who naturally shone, like I was drawn to the stage. I was drawn to be someone who took up space. It's something that I've always been very good at. But in my culture, which I was brought up in England, it was very common to kind of cut down the tall poppies, to be, don't be so loud, don't be such a center of attention all the time. Kind of just such a, you're always wanting everybody to look at you. And there's a lot of shaming that comes around that. And I think that a massive part of my journey has been being someone who is so naturally in place when I am on stage, and yet the shame that then I had to unpack, the shame that was put on me around that stuff. Like who am I as a woman to want to be seen? And then the innate desire to be liked that I had inside me, this desperate need to want to be liked and to be cool and to be accepted, and how that would play out with myself when I was on stage. And a massive part of the work that I do around what it is to be courageous, to really speak our truth, comes from my own journeys, and whether that's my journey of accepting myself and really letting myself be seen rather than being up on the stage and trying desperately to get this audience to like me. What is it, just being myself up there? And then the world of growing up as a queer woman in a world where both of those intersectional places are marginalized and systematically silenced, and the silencing of stories. And so for me, as somebody who is so deeply drawn to the stage, so deeply drawn to stories and to the power of stories, and then someone who, I think we all have stories that we need to tell and that deserve to be heard. So I think to getting where I came today came from that mix between what I'm naturally drawn towards and what I was given as my challenges in life. And it's been an absolute blessing for me.
When did you start speaking on stage?
I've been on stage since I was small, since I was probably about 9 or 10. But doing my spoken, because I wanted to be an actress, I wanted to be on TV and movies and stuff, like a lot of young girls did. But I started doing spoken word when I was about 19, so I'm 33 now. So that was, I was traveling, I was hitchhiking around Canada at the time, and I noticed I'd been at stage school, I'd been at stage school and all this other stuff, and been really aiming at being an actress. But there was something in the world of theatre that I really struggled with, and that was this world of kind of the two-facedness, the competition, the ripping each other down, the wearing the masks, the kind of fierce masks of confidence and and character and attitude that everybody was wearing, and I just didn't feel very okay with it. It just didn't feel right for me, and I kind of ran away from it all and went traveling. And when I was traveling, I stumbled across this little open mic night in Victoria, in British Columbia, and these 3 people got on stage and started beatboxing and doing spoken word, and I was just like, wow, this is the crossover point. Because on one hand, I was really into theatre stuff, but on the other hand, I was massively into activism. I'd already spent, even by the age of 19, I'd already spent years on the front line, activism within the UK, in tree sits and kind of locking on in the middle of rows and going to protests and this sort of stuff. And the world of spoken word seemed to take those two things, this love of performance and arts and storytelling, and yet this passion for changing the world and making the world a better place, and merged the two together in this really beautiful and authentic way. And I kind of walked away from it a changed woman. I kind of came back from Canada going, right, well, this is my thing.
What, for those that aren't as familiar with like spoken word poetry, how can you define that?
I love that question. I don't get asked that very much anymore because lots of people seem to know about it. But when I first started spoken word, I'd say to people, oh yeah, I do spoken word poetry, and I get this blank look. And so my description of it is it's the world where poetry, theatre, and I guess a little bit of like hip hop and rap kind of merge together. So it's depending on who you are, you have a bit more of one or the other. Some people live more in the poetic realm, some people live more in the theatrical realm, and some people seem to live more in the kind of hip hop or rap wordplay realm. I'm definitely quite theatrical. I think I merge all 3 of them pretty well, but there are some people that are, for example, way more hip hop, and you can hear the beats as they're speaking, and you can kind of feel the rhythms as they speak. And so for me, it's kind of poetry with the theatrical and a rhythmical edge to it. And I think in this day and age, it's actually what makes it such a special tool is it takes something which has so often only been reserved for the elite, which is literature, and it puts it into the hands of the people, of the folk. So I mean, like it really, spoken word really kicked off in marginalized communities. So for example, in the Puerto Rican community in America, the Puerto Rican New York community, that's kind of where slam and spoken word really started to take off, and in Chicago, and then in the queer community as well. It was giving a space for people who had been silenced to have a voice, and to also own literature in a way that they've never been allowed to before, because throughout history, literature and poetry specifically had been really reserved. Even the language used in poetry was reserved for people who had a specific type of education, who'd been privileged to get a specific type of education. And so I think that the power of it comes from that fact that really anyone can access it, and you don't have to have some kind of a specific way of using language to do it. You can come as you are and as who you are and speak your truth and your story in your way, and it still counts spoken word.
I love that description. You highlighted a few things there that I wanted to kind of pull out, and one of them is what your life has been like growing up as queer, and how you've led with bravery through, coming out and just being who you are, and like you said, coming out and coming as you are. I love that. That was really beautifully said. So I'd kind of love to explore that journey as well.
Yeah, I think I realized my own sexuality quite young. I think I was about 12 or 13. So it was as I was beginning to explore sexuality in general, I clicked on pretty quickly that I was attracted to all genders, all people. It didn't matter what body they had. And was very quickly boxed by society as being bisexual, which I don't really reject that box, but it doesn't particularly relate to me. I like the word queer because it has the fluidity in it, the sense of fluidity of all genders, of all people. And I think I was very lucky in my own mindset, as in I never doubted the rightness of my sexuality or at least I never doubted that being queer was okay. I was like, okay, I think that the people who are homophobic are obviously wrong. But I did have a lot of people telling me that it was a phase, that I was, again, attention seeking, this story coming back, especially as a woman, being told that you're doing things to seek attention, you're doing things to receive some kind of like attention that was put on me. And so even now in my 30s, I have to unpack this story like almost daily when I'm attracted to people, that maybe it's a phase, that maybe I'm not queer, maybe I'm just like, or maybe I'm a lesbian and just not admitting it, or maybe I'm straight and just not admitting it, or maybe I'm doing it for attention. And also I'm what most people class as polyamorous as well. So I have multiple connections happening simultaneously. And I recently, about 7 months ago, fell in love with a cis man, and I have some other lovers who are trans non-binary, and I was talking to them. I was like, oh my God, like I've fallen in love with this man, and does that mean I'm not queer anymore? And they looked at me and they're like, Fleassy, 2 out of your 3 lovers are trans non-binary people. You're definitely still queer. But that for me really kind of, it really highlights something that I think a lot of people who identify as bisexual feel, and that is that our story has been silenced by all parties. We were never gay enough to be gay and never straight enough to be straight. And until very, very recently have been kind of excluded from the picture, excluded from a lot of narratives. So I think that's been my main battle with my queerness, is actually not owning that it's okay to be queer. That's not been a problem for me, but owning that I belong, this sense of belonging and not being feeling like maybe I what's the term? There's a word for it, imposter syndrome. The sense of imposter syndrome in whatever community that I was moving in. And it's been a really the act of actually speaking out about my imposter syndrome has been one of the biggest one of the biggest shifts in actually breaking through it. I remember being at the National Poetry Slam in the States last year, and I was speaking to a friend of mine who is also a trans non-binary person, and I just met them there, and I was standing in this room full of 300 queer people who are all poets, and I just said to them, I just don't know if I feel queer enough to be here. I don't know if I belong to have my story said here, because I'm not like as queer as other people. And they just looked at me and they're like, what do you mean? Like that is called imposter syndrome, and I want you to know that I feel it too. And I was like, wow, like here is this person who I'm classing as being, higher up on the queer ladder than myself, which is an absurd concept in itself. And they are feeling the same feelings as me. And it made me look around that room in a different way and go, oh my God, every single one of these people in this room have been brought up to believe that they don't belong. And we're all in this room together feeling like imposters. And that was a sense of connection and unity that I found. And actually that's the kind of the nutshell of the work that I do. I think with I run an event called Mother Tongue, which is a women's spoken word space and a platform for women's voices. And what I witness is women standing up there, queer women, straight women, telling their stories. And no matter how alone they felt before they told their story, they walk away from it in a room full of people who feel connected to. There's this sense of connection, and then it breaks down so much of the internal isolation that causes so many societal problems, I think, in this day and age.
Wow, yeah, the imposter syndrome. Yeah, that one's such a real feeling for, I think, so many people out there, and especially I know listeners here, as well as myself, who've, been taking these greater risks in life and stepping into, another level of bravery and courage. And with that, like, I know here that you've got Brene Brown as one of your women who inspires you. And I too feel like she has set an example for what is possible. And I think that's something that, we all get to do. And with that imposter syndrome, it feels so uncomfortable. And, I'd love to kind of hear how you navigate that when you feel those feelings of I don't belong. Do you kind of go into like affirmations, or, what helps you shift out of that?
Well, that's great. I think I want to also name that it doesn't just exist within the queer realm. Like as you're saying, like probably everyone listening to this podcast experiences imposter syndrome sometime. And another place that I really feel it is in the world of business, as a woman and as an entrepreneur, and also as somebody who didn't come from the business realm. I came from the activism realm. I came from living on the streets. Like 10 years ago, you would never have caught me in any kind of business situation. I was living as low-key a lifestyle as I could, and didn't have a clue about that stuff. So when I find myself in, like at TEDx, standing in front of a room full of people who have these, doctorates in rocket science or whatever else they have, I definitely feel like an imposter. And I think, for one part of it is that the story of I don't belong is one of my 3 core shame stories, right? So I have this understanding, like in the work that I do around using our courageous voice, I have this concept that we all carry these different shame stories that are there that we use to protect us, to keep us safe. And at some point in our life, they did keep us safe. They kept us small, so we didn't take a risk that could have been dangerous for us. But now they don't necessarily serve us anymore, but they still keep playing out. And I have 3 core shame stories that come up for me almost every day. And the first one is, who am I to impose my voice on these people? Who am I to impose myself on these people? My second shame story is, who am I to think I'm qualified enough to be in this space or to speak up in this way? And the third shame story that I get all the time is soon somebody is going to find out that I'm a fake, that I'm faking it, that I'm blagging it, that I don't really know, that I'm not as good, I'm not as kind, I'm not as clever, I'm not as funny as they think I am, and I'm going to get called out for it. And they're my core shame stories, and my brain will tell me those stories in completely different languaging to try and trick me. But when I can actually catch myself telling myself that I don't belong and bring it back to one of those shame stories, I'm like, I see what's going on. This is one of my shame stories. And acknowledging, we as women are alive because of the silence of our great grandmothers. There was one woman in our history at some point who stayed alive because she stayed silent. And it was her silence that kept us, that made it possible for us to exist. And so there is deep reverence for our capacity to stay silent when we need to, or to stay small when we need to keep ourselves safe. But if it's not keeping us safe anymore, then we need to unpack that. We need to stop the silence, because actually right now the silence isn't keeping us safe. It's not. And we have, Maya Angelou has this fantastic, or she said this fantastic thing, which was, there is no greater agony than the burden of an untold story. And for me, that is when I think of that in the realms of what it is, what I'm witnessing around me in the world of stories and women, is we got told so long, and we talked about the witches, we got actually burned at the stake for speaking. It's like if you speak up, if you show yourself as being too strong, too fierce, too sexy, too wild, too opinionated, if you piss somebody off in the slightest, you risked being burned from the outside in. So we silenced ourselves to keep ourselves safe. But we are now at a point, at a generation, where we are keeping those stories inside ourselves, and those stories are now burning us from the inside out. And the risk is now greater to keep silent than it is to speak up, for most people, and not for everybody, because there are some, there are some places in our life that and some people who live in certain places that really, it is still very dangerous to speak up. And so it's about understanding for me. When I'm going to get those fears of belonging, I look around myself, and the first thing I think is, is it safe? Is it just uncomfortable, or is it unsafe? Which one is it? And if it's just uncomfortable, I'm like, okay, well then I can be here because it's not unsafe to be here and speak. And then I look around the room and I see that each of those people in that room, like I did in the Queer Poetry Slam, I look around and I see these people, and every single one of them in that room are dealing with their shame stories. And every single one of them has had some story in themselves marginalized and silenced. Every single one of those people cries. Every single one of them has felt heartbreak. And every single person around me in that space hungers for connection. Everyone. Because that's the thing that every human hungers for, or is a sense of connection, whether that's to themselves, to another being, or to some greater divine connection.
Right.
That's what we hunger for. And so when I can remember that, when I step out into the world to do whatever it is I'm doing, whether that's going shopping or standing on a stage in front of, a room full of women working in big data and crypto, which is the world that I don't understand at all. And I feel like I'm so different from them. And then I stand up and I look around, I'm like, every single woman in this room knows what it is to be silenced. Every single one of them is deeply hungering for connection, and probably wearing a mask for most of their life, because that's what we've been taught to do as women. And when I can speak to that, when I can speak to the woman behind the mask, when I can speak to the part of them that is hungering for connection, then something massive can shift in all of us, and the imposter syndrome for all of us disappears.
Yeah, I think we can really all relate to that one singular thing that you really brought it home to, is that we've all been silenced at some point. And I really believe a lot of the karmic healing that we're doing as women now today, and why we signed up to be here, is to really break through that. And that's why I love podcasting. But you've really, sounds like the word fierce really comes through when I hear you speak. And it just sounds like, you are in your alignment, and this is what you're meant to be doing. And it's really just beautiful to be able to create that space for women to have, to see each other, to bring each other home. And, the question kind of pops up is like, what would you say to some women who they knowingly inside have been silencing themselves, and they know that they are being called to speak up? Where would you guide them first?
The first place is that really understanding and believing that you are worthy of speaking, and then finding a safe place to do it. I think a lot of people feel like if they've got a story they need to tell, they imagine themselves telling it in a place that is perhaps petrifying, maybe standing in a room full of people, or like making a public post on Facebook about something that they have never spoken about. But actually, that could be pushing your safety zone. No one can tell you where your safety zone is, or where your safety zone ends. I have this image that I work with a lot, and that's that I'm in the middle of a few circles. So I'm this central point, and around me is a circle, which is my buffer, and that's my comfort zone. And that is the world that I live in every day, and I feel very comfortable moving through it. It's not edgy, it's not risky, it's easy. And then beyond that comfort zone is the world of discomfort, but it's within the safety zone. So there's another big circle, which is the safety zone. And it's uncomfortable, but it's safe. I'm not gonna get murdered, or I'm not gonna get punched in the face, or I'm not gonna get, lose my job or whatever in this realm, but it is going to feel really vulnerable to show up in that space. And then outside of that circle is the territory that I don't go into, which is the unsafe territory. And so for me, it's about how far outside of that comfortable space can I step, and where can I find those first little steps? Don't go jumping off a cliff. Just find a space find one person even in your life that it feels safe to show up to in an honest way, and start there. And so when with the witches poem, for example, that you mentioned earlier, like I didn't just like write that poem and then stand and then put it out on Uplift without showing it to anyone, you know. The first thing that I did when I wrote it was I went online. I was full of fire, like I could feel the fire of the words in my body. I was like, people need to hear this. And I just put it online and said, hey, I need a woman to tell a poem to. Can one of my friends call me? And one of my friends in Tasmania rang me up, and she just said, I can't talk, I'm on a bus, tell me the poem. You know, that's all she said. And I read it to her, and she said, thanks. And then hung up. Okay. And that was it. That was all I needed to do, was to tell it to someone who I knew would hear me, who I felt safe to speak those words to. And I needed to know what they felt like in the air. I needed to know what the words felt like escaping my lips. I didn't need a response. I didn't need her opinion. What I needed was to speak them and to feel myself speaking them. And to know that it was safe for me to speak them because I'd feel it in my body. And then from then I went straight off from hanging up from her to doing a Facebook Live video just off my personal page. And I did the poem again, and I felt, because that then felt like it was within my comfort zone. Many people, that would be outside the safety zone, but it was within my safety zone. It still felt, it was edgy, it was uncomfortable to do it, but it was inside my safety zone to do it on my Facebook Live. And it reached like 65,000 people or something, which is absurd for one person's personal, you know, Facebook Live video. And
wow.
Then we did the Uplift video, and that's what's reached the 2.8 million. But for me, that's the key. I couldn't do the Uplift video if I hadn't had that one friend ring me up first and give me that platform, that safe space to share my story in a way that where I felt seen and I felt safe and I felt held. And quite often when we think about showing up in the world, we're going to think about putting ourselves in a place that is actually petrifying and scare ourselves out of it. And that's the shame story, is trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us small. But if you're feeling that, if you feel like speaking and you feel yourself shutting yourself down, ask yourself in that moment when you feel your voice shutting yourself down, and you ask yourself, you know, is it serving me to not speak my story? Is it serving me to stay small? Because maybe it is. Maybe there's a reason for staying small in that moment, but there's a big chance that it's not. And in that moment, when you feel like you feel that rise in you, that desire to step forward and say something, and you catch, you know, like when you kind of almost put a plug in your mouth and you can feel it sitting in your throat so you don't speak it, and you kind of swallow it back down again. Just as you put that plug in, stop and go, is it serving me to swallow this? And if it isn't, then take the risk. As long as you're within your safety zone, take your risk and show up in a way that is honest and real in yourself. Because the magic that comes with honesty and courage is it actually attracts honesty and courage. So when I show up more honestly and more courageously and more vulnerably in my life, people around me start doing the same thing. And if there's people around me who aren't prepared to be honest and to be courageous, they kind of disappear out of my life. They don't hang around me anymore. And at first that can be a bit shocking. And after a while, you kind of just realize, well, good. Because I don't actually want to be around people who aren't actually going to give me themselves. I don't want that. I don't want to be hanging out with a bunch of masks, a bunch of facades. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. What I want is real people and real connection. And the more fiercely and gently I decide to show up in that way. You say you hear fierceness in me, and I like this. I use this term, fierce gentle, and that is that I'm I do feel like I'm fierce, but I'm also very, very deeply committed to nurturing my gentle self. A part of me that understands about care and about compassion. And so, how can I be fierce and have strong boundaries and really know who I want to be and how I want to show up in a way that actually comes from compassion and from love, not from wanting to destroy. So, yeah, I think I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but it's about that real desire to share your story and not capping it and questioning, you know, does it serve me to stay silent?
Well, that question, I think, can take us back to ultimately exactly where we need to go. Is this serving me? And, that's something that it was a good shift to start asking myself that on this like personal development, self-loving journey, was to start asking me that then, doubting or questioning or feeling like, I'm not in alignment or something. I think it's so simple. Our brains want to make it super complicated, but I love that you just bring that back out too. Is it serving me? What was it like to then experience a video that went viral? Was that your first viral video on your spoken word coach?
Yeah, it was my first viral. I had a couple of pieces reach a couple of thousand views, which had blown my mind. Yeah. and it gets to a point, like it gets past like 10,000 people, and I stopped thinking people when I started just seeing numbers. And it got to like 10,000, 500,000, a million. Like it reached 1 million people in a day, and oh my God, I felt so raw. I felt this feeling of like my face, my story, my voice has been witnessed by 1 million people at least in the last 24 hours. And I remember turning my phone off. I went and got a massage. I got my friend Z to give me a massage, and I just kind of went there and I kind of laid down on the table and it's like, I just need to escape from the whole world for a moment. So there was a real vulnerability to it, that feeling of being, especially if our big thing that we're overcoming is the story of not being seen, of hiding ourselves and hiding our true self, and to step forward and have your voice heard. I mean, I thought it would reach a lot of people, but I never imagined the amount of people that it would reach. And yeah. And it still blows me away. I think a lot of the time it's just numbers. I'm like, yeah, 2.8 million people. But then when I actually stop and think about it, I'm like, okay, now Fleassy, imagine 10 people. Great. Now imagine 100 people. Okay, I can do that. Imagine 1,000 people. I can just about imagine 1,000 people. Imagine 10,000. I'm struggling. I want to get to 100,000 people. I'm like, I can't picture that. I can't picture 1,000 people in my head. That doesn't compute. So yeah, it starts to. If I get really into it, it can be really overwhelming. But one of the magical parts of it is that I found myself. I did a tour of the US last year, and people were approaching me who I didn't know. I'd go to an event or something and someone would come up to me and be like, oh my God, you're that witch's poem woman. And I'd be like, yes I am. Yep. And I'm kind of used to that within Melbourne because I'm known as a poet in Melbourne. So I'm used to people stopping me and saying hi, but they're usually like a friend of a friend, or they've seen me at a gig that I know, not an absolute stranger on the other side of the world. And I had one woman who drove an hour to come to a gig, like a small local Portland poetry gig. And she had seen witches and just really wanted to meet me in person. And she drove an hour just to see my 15-minute set, and that was, yeah, it was really amazing. It was a really beautiful feeling, very affirming as an artist, which is a huge thing to feel affirmed as an artist, because, what are we constantly struggling against in the angst of being artists, is that feeling that we're worthy. But also really affirming as a woman to know that our story, that story is so relevant to so many women. It's not just my story. It is the story of so many women. And in that, it was so affirming to know how many people stood behind it, how many people were agreeing to it and saying yes to it and wanting to see more of that in the world, more of the strength of women, more of the fierceness of women, and more of the truth of what it is for a woman when she is able to stand in her no in absolute strength.
Absolutely. I think we are that the fact that you've created that vehicle to put that out there and really speak your voice it's just proof that we're all really hungry for it. I often get the most response when truth is spoken, and you can feel it in your body and in your bones, and you're like, yes, this is what I need. This is what my soul needs. And I really believe that that's what this, this rise of the feminine movement or experience, or, whatever you want to call it, as we rise together, we are really cultivating a sense of freedom and 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 collaboration, and being able to see one another again. When I really, back in the day, we were like sisters, and being those times when we were burned at the stakes and kind of, had to almost throw each other in the fire, and we're still healing from that. There's just so many layers, but it feels like there is this this time of this great awakening where we are ready to dive in and receive a greater level of who we really are as women and taking our power back. So, thanks for being such a great example for that, and with the work that you do. So I have a question, and I would love to know how either perhaps you might be interested in sharing that poem on here, or if we could share the poem on here after the podcast airs, or anything maybe that something speaks to just share what some of your voice and spoken poetry.
Yeah, I'd love to share a poem with you. Would you like witches, or would you like a different poem?
I think they're all everybody here is like, let's hear witches.
Okay, all right, I'll give you witches.
In the past, they burned us because they thought we were witches. Just because we knew what to do with herbs outside of the kitchen, because we knew how to dance, how to seduce, how to pray, because we moved with the cycles of the moon. In the past, they burned us alive because they knew that we are witches. So now we cast spells with our mouths, pieces of our heart spill out. It is incredible, the power of a woman who is not afraid to say no. No, we won't sit any longer while you ponder on our rights to give or not give life, on our rights to make another woman our wife, on our rights to be safe, to get paid an equal wage, to have a voice, in a place where we might actually make a change. It is incredible, the amount of ways that they have slayed just to keep us small. If they could have, they probably would have burned us all, but they couldn't with fire, so they did it with words, laid down laws to determine the amount of our worth. They kept us in contracts, they separated our circles, erased us from pages and made labor-saving devices our saviors. It is incredible how quickly knowledge can fade, how much effort was invested to lead us astray. But we will not come quietly. Well, there's another thing they've tried to take away. Our rights to exclaim our orgasms ecstatically. We will not come quietly. We will open our mouths and let our spells spill out, cast poetic prayers into the night so that every woman can hear the howl of her sister's delight, reminding her that her voice deserves to be heard. Let her jaw drop, let her shame stop, let her body scream under the self-pleasure of what it means to be a woman who can speak freely. You see, words, they carry meaning. And they have fooled us for so long into believing that no means yes. So much so that I'm almost impressed, except, well, I finally discovered that they're right. So I've claimed back that no as mine, because every no I throw against their forces is another yes I retain for my own self-worth. It is a spell I cast for my own protection. It is incredible, the power of a woman who is not afraid to say no. And this old witch, I'm done with broomsticks. I'm done with know your place. This witch knows that some knowledge just won't fade. That every woman is my sister. That through the hubble and the bubble and the toil and the trouble, we grow stronger when we cast our spells together. That we entered the fire and now we rise from the ashes, and we are holding our candles and lighting our matches until the night becomes lighter and our voices can grow, because we have remembered we are witches and we have learned to say no.
It's like there's so many things in my body that it's like there's this sensation of like power, and it's like a Kundalini rise, that feeling when it's like, oh yeah, that's the truth. That's it right there.
Mm-hmm.
You are such a gift. Thank you so much for sharing all that, and just so much of your wisdom and bravery and voice ultimately. You highlighted, we could probably go off on a tangent on this, but in the poem it did share about our rights, and there's a lot going on in women's rights right now, and yeah, it's a big deep breath. And what would you say is your ideal vision for women, and where you want this to really go, and any maybe insight on how anyone listening can really get involved?
I missed the word. What is my ideal what for women?
Oh, ideal vision of what?
Vision.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, firstly, the one of the most frustrating things about that poem for me is that it just seems to get more relevant every day, not less relevant. And that is, I mean, we have had at least 25 women murdered in Australia this year. That was more than one a week when I got that statement, when I got that number. It's probably more than that now. Multiple of those, like 4 of them, were women just walking through the streets of Melbourne. And I'm also aware of some of the stuff going on in the States, especially around the rights of women to their own bodies, to their own reproductive stories. And I think that really my vision is we have autonomy over our own bodies, that nobody else is entitled to our story, that nobody else is entitled to our body, that nobody else is entitled to tell us how much we're worth, and what sexy looks like, and what strong looks like, and what fierce looks like, and what motherhood looks like, and what woman looks like, and what, any of that stuff. It's nobody else's to define, except for ourselves as women. And so my vision is is a world that we have exactly the same freedoms that men have, that they've always had. And yeah, it's an interesting one, how can we, I'm going to go back to your questions, but like this, what can we do to step forward in that? And I've been reading this incredible book recently, and it's looking at race, not at gender. So it's called a book called White Fragility, which is incredible. I highly recommend everybody reading it. But she made this point in the book. The author made this point that a big challenge that comes up for people of color being that, to get the rights that they deserve, they have never been able to you can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to have those rights. They had to come to white people and ask to be given those rights. And that's fucked. It's absolutely fucked. Yeah. And it's the same for women, is that we can't, as women, even the suffragists weren't like, right, well, we actually realized that that we should be allowed to vote, so we're just going to start voting. It doesn't work like that, because we're living in a patriarchal system. We're living in a white patriarchal system as well, in the dominant culture, which means that in that we generally have to pander to a white man to get any rights given to us. Wow. And I'm a white woman, but and so just to clarify on that, but it does mean that I think that quite often our nature when we are in this battle is to alienate men and to push men away. And I think that for me, the moving forward is, how do we move forward in a way that is safe for women and is empowering for women, but also isn't that it's actually going to work. And attack doesn't work because it puts people into defense and shame, and we know that because we've been living in shame for generations. So how do we move forward from a place that isn't in shame or in blame? How do we find a way to move forward in a way that is actually, these are the facts, these are what we need to do, these are the facts, this is what needs to change, how can we work together to change that, to make a better world? rather than being, I'm this, you're that, you suck, you know, and which is, I feel a lot, especially when I look at politics, you know, I look at politics and it's mostly men and they're mostly deciding what we do with ourselves, and it makes me angry and it makes me want to be like, you suck. But I think a big part of it is how can we find a way to break out of that blame shame mindset and actually just focus on the important part, which is making change and actually creating change. And another kind of key point as women of a more personal level of how we can show up is that and this is something that I say a lot in my talks is you know, we as women, the patriarchal society has been created on the basis that women be kept in a specific position, and that is a position of servitude. So that means the power stays in the hands of certain people, of men, or the patriarchy. And to do that, you have to take away the power of women, and to take away power from people, from any marginalized group. The best way to take away power is to take away a voice, to take away their voice. And the best way to take away their voice is to take away their self-worth, because then they don't feel like they even deserve to have a voice in the first place. You don't need to actively silence them. They will silence themselves. And that's exactly what has happened to women. It's exactly what white people have done to people of color. It's exactly what colonial people have done to Indigenous people here in Australia. What we've done as colonizers to the Indigenous people here in Australia. It is to take away the self-worth, to take away the sense of belonging, and in that, to take away the voice, and then take away the voice, take away the power. So if we as women want to reclaim our power, we have to reclaim our voice. And to reclaim our voice, we have to reclaim our sense of worth and our sense of self. We have to stop listening to the media when it tells us that we need to be skinnier, or our hair needs to be like more flowy, or we need to, like, whatever the story is, we need to have children to be women, or we need to have vaginas to be women, or we need to have, we need to do whatever, that we need to be young and doing yoga every day to be women. No, it's all there. It's all there with an undertone of taking away our self-worth. And if we get caught up in the story of our self-worth being taken away, then we lose our voice. We lose our voice, we lose our power. So the key part is to reclaim your worth and reclaim your voice. Start knowing that you're worthy of speaking, and speak. And that's where the power comes back.
So powerful, yeah. I think there's just so much truth in all of that, and also with what you were saying, just bringing in like the patriarchal system, and the thought came to mind how it's so fascinating that in the truth of the dynamics of what the masculine is actually meant to do for the feminine is to provide a safe space. And yet here we are in this really unsafe space where we, our rights are getting taken away from us left and right. And, I never really thought about that perspective that you just put out by, we have to go ask the white man. We have to, and just the way that is so fucked, honestly. It's just fucked. So.
You broke up as you said that, so I didn't catch that bit.
I just said it's so fucked.
Yeah, absolutely fucked. It's absolutely fucked. It's absolutely fucked. And
yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Excuse me. And in that, I also want to encourage us all to remember our own, that we don't need to live in a victim story about it.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't. And that's the big part of the empowerment, is owning what's fucked, and then actively stepping forward in a way to make change. Self-care is a massive part of that. If you're in a place where you can't be politically standing up because you're not in an emotionally strong place, that's okay. That's completely okay. Work on yourself. Work on stepping up into yourself. But if you are able to step up on a larger scale, whether that's socially or interpersonally or politically, then do it, because shit's not going to change otherwise. It's just not. It's not going to change.
Yeah, well, we're the voices now, the generations. I think you said you were like around 33, so I'm almost 30, and I really believe we have, this is now our time, and those below us, the millennials, I can't imagine what it's like to also, what is the generation below millennials? I'm trying to think. Is it Gen Y? No, Gen Z?
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm not sure. But, they're growing up with all this technology, right? And, they're not connected to nature. And, I spent most of my life like outside. So growing up at least, and even now. And so it's like we are the gap between the generation before us with so much patriarchal systems. Not that it's not rooted in our generations, but we have this opportunity, to really make the change and really be that. And I think it's through entrepreneurship, it's through poetry, it's through art, it's through dance, it's through all of these ways that really, the goddess moves through us. And and anyone, I mean, whatever is moving through each and every one of us, it's a greater power that often I know feels scary, but, I think you have really, to wrap up the overall energy of what you've brought is really to step into it and not be afraid and be brave around that and be courageous. And so, yeah, thank you. I mean, so powerful. I love to, offer this space to really share what it is that you've got going on, where people can find you, where they can work with you, and share from wherever, which way. I'm sure you're on all things. There's so many media streams nowadays.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. Excuse me. So yeah, I have a few things going on. I've got my online program Rise, which is basically if you're inspired to really step into claiming your voice in the way that I'm talking about, and you want to work with me to do that, then I have an online program called Rise Speaker Training, which isn't gender specific. It's gender inclusive. And there are a lot of women in the group, but it's really about a lived experience of how do we actually take the steps to claim our space and to claim our voice and to claim our truth. And I've given you a link, which I'm sure might go up in the show notes or something.
Yeah, we can put that in the show.
Yeah, a link to the direct link to the program. And if you use the promotional code RISEUP15, then you get a 15% discount, because you're awesome for listening to me chat at you for the last 45 minutes. And outside of that, I'm actually writing a book at the moment called The Courageous Voice, which is looking at how do we unpack this systemized silencing, this marginalization, and how do we really learn to step forward in a fiercely gentle way, in a way that is fierce and yet honest and authentic. It's not just coming from a place of anger, but it's coming from a place of actually wanting to make change and reclaiming our voice in the most courageous way that we can. So I've been writing that book, and if anyone's interested in following me on that journey and being part of that book happening, I'm on Patreon at the moment, and I'm trying to get as many people following me on Patreon as I can. So that's patreon.com/Fleassy. And and join me as a patron and get little insights into my life and my journey through that. Other than that, I'm on, Facebook, Instagram, the whole story. I'm very, very active on social media.
Amazing. Well, we'll definitely include all those links for all you amazing babes to hear, to go find Fleassy and support her in her work. And I'm really excited to hear about your book. So maybe we'll have to have you back on when you do your book launch. And I'm sure that's going to be something incredible, because you're already an amazing speaker. And I feel like you and Brene Brown are like related or something.
Oh my God, I love that. You're not the first person to say that to me. And I will own. I'm going to put it out there as this is reaching people. It is an absolute dream of mine to speak alongside, or even just speak to Brene Brown and connect my way.
It's already happening.
She's amazing.
It's always funny sometimes when I'm like prepping for these podcasts or just downloading, what's going to be the theme, what's going to kind of stepping into the energy, even like the minute I wake up for the day. It's really fascinating. I'm sure you experience this, like when you're going to have a workshop or a seminar or a speech or something. And I turned on this clip by Brene Brown and Oprah, and they were talking about self-sabotage. And I was just, of course, like randomly selected Brene Brown, and then here we are talking about her, and you are definitely going to have, like, I already saw in my vision you standing next to her, so it's happening. Yes.
Oh. Full body goosebumps. Amazing. Thank you for visioning that for me. I think I would be very, very blessed if that got to happen.
Yes. So, okay. Well, I love ending the show with this final question, and it, feels like it's a question that you can just sort of drop into and embody. And I always love to ask, what does it mean to you to be a goddess?
What does it mean to me to be a goddess? I'm actually wearing my goddess earrings right now. It's just a big long word that says goddess. And
yes.
and
jewelry, that's what it means.
Yeah, for me it's that it's the God, the divine, the goddess is in everything. And so for me it's how can I embody every facet of what it is to be a woman. Throughout history in different cultures, the goddess has been kind of segregated into different avatars to represent all the different facets of her, because she's such the archetype of goddess is such a faceted and multifaceted experience. So if I want to be a goddess, how can I be, and this is again fierce gentle, how can I be fierce yet gentle? How can I show up in a way that is authentic and real, and worship myself, hold that sense of reverence to myself that I would hold to the divine externally, and yet also not take the bullshit.
I love that. That's beautiful. I love that it's like the polarities of the goddess, it's like Kali Ma and, sweet, like Aphrodite. And that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, it has been such an honor to drop in with you and connect with you, Fleassy. You are such an inspiration and just overall badass, fierce goddess that I'm excited to have this message share out to our listeners here. So if you have any last words of wisdom to say to everybody listening, what would that be?
It would be that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, what you look like, who you love, that you have a story. You have a story to tell, and your voice is not only needed but very much wanted in this world. So be courageous. Speak up.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for being here and working with all of our Wi-Fi kinks and technical breakdowns today. You're amazing. And to all the sisters out there and brothers, I love you. I hear you. I see you. Until next time. Bye for now.